Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I brought Schofield from his early beginnings to commanding most of Missouri. Now we follow Schofield as the war leads him to different theaters and different opportunities. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Schofield grew frustrated when Samuel Curtis took command of the new Department of the Missouri. He felt that the politicians who degraded his abilities hurt his chances to ever take command, and in frustration, he petulantly asked to resign if he didn't get a field command, rather than be a district commander. Curtis agreed to the arrangement and removed him as district commander and gave him command of the Army of the Frontier, basically switching positions with himself. The army that Schofield commanded occupied the area around Springfield, Missouri, and contained about 8,000 men who could take part in an active campaign. Over 2,000 troops were needed to guard the supply lines and communications. When James Blunt's Kansas troops were added to Schofield's command, that brought his active troops to around 15,000 men, which Schofield divided into 3 divisions. Schofield hoped to achieve battlefield glory for himself, but when he invaded southwestern Missouri, the Confederate force opposing him moved into northern Arkansas. As he moved against them, they continued to retreat, unable to bring the enemy to battle. Schofield depressingly moved back into Missouri. The lack of combat led some of his men to refer to him as Granny Schofield. He wouldn't hold command long before he contracted typhoid fever and turned command over to Blunt, his old nemesis. As Schofield tried to recover, Blunt fought and won a victory at the Battle of Prairie Grove. The victory skyrocketed Blunt's name through Congress for a promotion to Major General, something Schofield wanted for a long time, but the radical Republicans in Congress denied. Schofield was mortified to learn of Blunt's promotion, and when Congress agreed to increase the number of Major Generals and Brigadier Generals, Schofield hoped to make the cut, but certain congressmen prevented him from receiving the rank. Schofield told a humorous story about an Irishman who assisted him, and that the assistant kept the insignias for Brigadier General and Major General in his trunk. When Schofield asked him why, he replied, "Ah, General, nobody can tell what may happen to you." The winter of 1862 and into the spring of 1863 was a turbulent time for Schofield as he sniped back and forth with Curtis through their respective reports. This didn't help Schofield politically within the Union forces in Missouri. Additionally, when Congress turned down Schofield's promotion request submitted by the President, it was decided that he could no longer command the Army of the Frontier because his subordinates now outranked him. Henry Halleck quickly got him transferred to an active command as a division commander in the Army of the Cumberland. This army was commanded by William S. Rosecrans at the time, and Schofield was assigned to the corps of George H. Thomas, the man who voted to dismiss him from West Point. Schofield thanked Halleck for getting him out of Missouri, saying, "I am as willing as anybody to be sacrificed when any good is to be accomplished by it, but do not like to be slaughtered for nothing." Schofield noted that joining the Army of the Cumberland in Tennessee was one of the happiest days of my life. That happy time in the Army of the Cumberland was short-lived, because less than a month after taking that position, Curtis was ousted as commander of the Department of the Missouri because of his political battles with the Missouri governor, as well as other politicians. Edwin Sumner, a former corps commander in the Army of the Potomac, was chosen to replace him, but died on his way to take command of the post. Finally, Lincoln put forward Schofield as the new departmental commander, and he was given a brevet promotion to Major General. Schofield began to try and calm the political waters in Missouri and create a good relationship between himself and the governor. As the departmental commander, he got rid of the District of Kansas and made the District of the Frontier and put James Blunt in charge of it, commanding most of Kansas, the Indian Territory, and part of Arkansas. To help calm tensions along the Missouri and Kansas border, he put the brother-in-law of William T. Sherman and a member of the politically powerful family in Ohio, Thomas Ewing, Jr., in charge of the border district. Schofield learned from his first couple of years in the war that politics could doom a general, and he worked to mitigate political backlash in a tumultuous state. Schofield got on the good side of Ulysses S. Grant as that general campaigned against the fortified city of Vicksburg, Mississippi. Schofield sent Grant numerous troops that aided in the capture of that city and the Mississippi River. Schofield also dealt with emancipation. Although pro-slavery supporters existed, the debate within the state government centered around those who supported immediate emancipation and those who supported gradual emancipation. With Schofield's permission, the New York Tribune published a letter the general wrote to a friend about his beliefs on slavery and emancipation. It stated, "You are right in saying that I was an anti-slavery man, though not an abolitionist before the war. These terms have greatly changed their relative meanings since the rebellion broke out. I regard universal emancipation as one of the necessary consequences of the rebellion, or rather as one of the means absolutely necessary to complete restoration of the Union, and this because slavery was the great cause of the rebellion, and the only obstacle in the way of a perfect Union. The perception of these important truths is spreading with almost astounding rapidity in this state. I have great hope that the State Convention, which meets on the 15th instant, will adopt some measure for the speedy emancipation of slaves. If so, our difficulties will be substantially at an end." Schofield walked a thin line between federal laws, state laws, and public opinion when it came to recruitment of African American men into the Union Army. The problem arose when many of his officers didn't care whether the black enlisted men came from loyal slave owners or not. Runaway slaves saw the Federal Army as a way to increase their chances of success in a post-emancipation world. Schofield, by this time adopting the belief in immediate emancipation, didn't care about the distinction between loyal or disloyal slave owners when it came to black recruitment, but he attempted to appease all parties while still aiding the Union war effort. The success of the Vicksburg campaign paid dividends to Schofield because Ulysses S. Grant, after capturing that Mississippi city, sent troops to help secure the capture of Little Rock, Arkansas. The city's capture in September was overshadowed by an atrocity that occurred in Schofield's jurisdiction. In August, the infamous Confederate guerrilla William Quantrill attacked Lawrence, Kansas, killing civilians and soldiers as well as burning the town. Republican Senator James Lane from Kansas called for retribution against Missouri with a major invasion. Schofield went to Leavenworth to defuse the situation. Both Lane and the governor of Kansas attacked Thomas Ewing, Jr. as the district commander, hoping to remove him from the post, but Schofield kept him on and attempted to placate the politicians all at the same time. When a Union officer confiscated horses stolen by runaway Missouri slaves, the mayor of Leavenworth arrested the officer and fined him $50 in cost. Ewing challenged the mayor's use of civil authority to reprimand soldiers and declared martial law. Tensions began to heat up until Schofield negotiated a truce, where the mayor agreed not to interfere with the army and Ewing agreed to lift martial law. Among all this, to fight back against Missouri guerrilla bands, Ewing issued General Order No. 9, 10, and 11, which called for depopulating 4 Missouri counties, expulsion of disloyal citizens, and the confiscation of slaves belonging to those aiding in the rebellion. Ewing also called for the destruction of some property that could be used by guerrillas. Schofield agreed with parts but amended the order, discouraging the destruction of property. The problem remained that logistically they would have trouble removing all the people from those counties. Nevertheless, Ewing removed about 20,000 inhabitants temporarily. Ewing's orders resulted in destruction of property and some outright murders. Abraham Lincoln fought off political attacks against Schofield, aiding in the general's battles against the guerrillas and trying to make peace between Kansas and Missouri. However, Lincoln realized that keeping Schofield in command of the department was going to cause trouble between the radical and conservative factions of the Republican Party. Kansas needed its own commander, and the department needed shrunk to make it more manageable. So Lincoln made Samuel Curtis commander in Kansas, and William S. Rosecrans, newly relieved from the Army of the Cumberland, to command the Department of the Missouri. Through a deal, he hoped to make Schofield's promotion permanent, but it fell through. Lincoln took care of the general by making him the commander of the Department of the Ohio and its army, the Army of the Ohio, constituting just the 23rd Union Army Corps. Nevertheless, Schofield was happy. He now had a field command. As one of his biographers explained, this new assignment also placed him in a perfect position to advance his career. Henry Halleck had schooled him on departmental administration, and now, under the tutelage of William T. Sherman, his education as a field commander would begin. If Halleck had sponsored him, and Lincoln sustained him in Missouri, his new bonds with Sherman and U.S. Grant would support and sustain him for many years thereafter. On February 8, 1864, Schofield took command of his new department from John G. Foster in Knoxville, Tennessee. The department contained nearly 20,000 men, but most of them were occupying Kentucky, preventing Confederate raiders from getting into the state. Schofield inherited the 23rd Corps, a mere skeleton of a corps. Confederate General James Longstreet still remained in East Tennessee, a constant reminder of the impotent nature of Schofield's command. In March, Sherman visited Schofield and saw the state of his troops. Being the commander of the Division of the Mississippi, Sherman redirected thousands of troops to bolster the ranks of Schofield's command. After the meeting, Sherman remarked that he found in Schofield steadiness, courage, and soldierly qualities. It was Schofield's job now to prepare his army to assist Sherman in the Atlanta campaign that would begin in May. Schofield went to work, moving supplies and troops into his department. By May, Schofield moved the Army of the Ohio, containing a little over 13,000 men, the smallest of the three armies in Sherman's army group, to northern Georgia. Schofield occupied the left flank of Sherman's force. Sherman desired to get around the Confederate entrenchments at Dalton, Georgia, by sending the Army of the Tennessee through Snake Creek Gap to cut the rebels off from Atlanta, while the Army of the Cumberland and the Army of the Ohio held them in place at Dalton. James McPherson, the Army of the Tennessee commander, shied away from pressing on to Resaca and his objective point, allowing Joseph E. Johnston, the Confederate Army commander, to transport his troops to that point, preserving his lines of communication and supply. Schofield's force did very little so far in the campaign, but there was already rifts in his command. Within days of beginning the campaign, Schofield requested Sherman's permission to relieve General Alvin Hovey as utterly inefficient and worthless as a division commander. Recognizing Hovey's past heroism at Champion Hill, Schofield attributed the problem to some sort of mental disease. He seems incapable of comprehending an order or of having any definite idea of what is transpiring around him. Sherman, also knowing Grant's regard for Hovey, turned down the request. The other division commander who gave Schofield fits, Henry Judah, didn't avoid Schofield's efforts. At the Battle of Resaca, Judah, without waiting for reconnaissance or support, attacked the Confederate lines, dragging in other units into the fight. Schofield couldn't tolerate two unreliable division commanders and removed him, replacing him with Milo Haskell. Johnston withdrew from Resaca and the pursuit continued. Johnston hoped to ambush a segment of Sherman's force and eliminate it from the campaign at Cassville, Georgia. Schofield's 23rd Corps and some other troops were the potential victims, but before the Confederates could spring their trap, the rebel corps commander John Bell Hood got reports of Union cavalry on their flank and called off the attack. Schofield's command was preserved. Sherman decided to swing to the right or west of Johnston's Army of Tennessee at Dallas, Georgia. At the battles of Dallas, New Hope Church, and Pickett's Mill, the Army of the Tennessee and the Army of the Cumberland battled Johnston, while Schofield's force saw little action. It may have been for the best, since Schofield fell ill, and also literally fell, when his horse fell into a gully on a dark night, injuring the general's leg. As Sherman forced Johnston to move further south to Kennesaw Mountain outside of Marietta, Georgia, Schofield got good news on 3 different occasions. 1, his old friend Francis P. Blair, Jr. had arrived to join the campaign with the 17th Army Corps of the Army of the Tennessee. 2, Schofield got rid of Hovey. Hovey resigned in anger over the size of his division and not getting promoted to Major General. His division was broken up and given to Haskell and Jacob D. Cox's division. 3, Congress finally made Schofield a Major General. Sherman wanted to threaten Johnston's left flank and move Schofield's army from the left flank to its right, hoping to force Johnston to withdraw or at the very least threaten the flank and hope for an opening for an attack. On June 22nd, John Bell Hood's corps launched an attack against Schofield at Culp's Farm. Joseph Hooker's 20th Corps held Schofield's left flank. Both men threw back their attacks, winning an easy victory against the aggressive corps commander. Sherman, in an uncharacteristic move for the campaign, decided to attack the fortified rebels on Kennesaw Mountain. The attack would happen a few days later.